Welcome to Sci-Fi Alien, the channel where the unknown becomes your next adventure. Have you ever made a decision on impulse that turned your life upside down? Gabriel Reyes did, when he bid on a spaceship without knowing it was already inhabited by a deadly, blue-skinned alien woman, Zyra. What was supposed to be a random, reckless purchase quickly becomes a life-or-death struggle when Gabriel steps aboard the ship and finds himself face-to-face with a plasma knife at his throat. Zyra, a fugitive hiding from a powerful past, has secrets that could change the fate of the galaxy. What started as a simple mistake soon spirals into a web of galactic conspiracies, where Gabriel and Zyra are hunted by bounty hunters and mercenaries, all desperate to get their hands on the ship. But the biggest twist? Zyra isn't just a stowaway, she's the key to uncovering the most dangerous secrets the galaxy has ever known. Will Gabriel survive the dangerous game he's unwittingly joined? Can he trust Zyra, or is she hiding something even darker? Stay with us as we unravel the mystery behind a spaceship, a fugitive, and the fight for survival in the vast unknown. You won't want to miss what happens next. Gabriel Reyes never thought that a simple bid on a spaceship would change the course of his life forever. He had been drifting through the monotony of his existence, like so many others. Work was tedious, his personal life non-existent, and the world around him felt small. On a particularly dull evening, with nothing but time to kill, he found himself scrolling through a late-night auction. Boredom had a funny way of leading to strange decisions, and Gabriel had never been one to shy away from taking a gamble, even if it was one that seemed too outrageous to be real. He wasn't expecting much, just a distraction from the emptiness of the moment. But then, a listing caught his eye, a derelict starship, sold as is. The auction description was sparse, almost cryptic, just a few blurry images of a dusty hull, battered and scarred by time. But the price was ridiculous. A combat cruiser, fully functional, for a mere 400 credits. It should have been a scam, Gabriel thought. No ship, especially one with a military-grade history, could possibly be that cheap. But something about it intrigued him, maybe the audacity of it all, or maybe just the overwhelming need to escape the mundane life he was living. With a laugh, and without giving it much thought, he placed a bid. He figured it was as harmless as any other impulse buy. The next thing he knew, the screen flashed with the words "You won" in bold letters. His heart skipped a beat. This wasn't just some small purchase, it was an entire spaceship, and somehow, it was now legally his. Gabriel sat there in disbelief, staring at the confirmation page, unsure whether to laugh or panic. He had actually won it. 400 credits. Less than a night out at a fancy bar, and now, he owned a combat ship. This wasn't just a bad idea, it was ridiculous. But there was no turning back. The next morning, Gabriel boarded a transport to collect his new prize. His mind raced with possibilities. What could he do with a ship like this? Was it even in working condition? Would it be a huge money pit? He didn't know. But at the very least, it was an adventure. The thought of being the owner of something as extraordinary as a spaceship filled him with excitement. Maybe he could turn it into a profitable venture, or maybe he could just keep it as a bizarre, quirky investment. The ship was docked on the outskirts of Kuranis Prime, a planet best described as barely lawful, a place where shady deals and questionable characters thrived. The station where the ship was kept was old, the walls dimly lit, and the air thick with dust. Gabriel couldn't shake the feeling that something was off as he stepped off the transport, but he dismissed it. It was just the usual grimy atmosphere of a spaceport. Nothing he hadn't seen before. As he approached the ship, his eyes widened. It wasn't a derelict relic as he had imagined, it was much more than that. The hull was battered, yes, but there was something about the ship that commanded attention. It was sleek, almost aggressive in its design, with modifications that spoke of years of careful alterations. The faded insignias on the side told a story he couldn't quite piece together. This ship had a history, a dangerous history, and Gabriel was suddenly aware of how little he actually knew about the vessel that now belonged to him. As he entered the airlock and stepped inside, the atmosphere of the ship hit him, a strange hum, like an old machine that had been running for too long. The interior was just as unexpected. It wasn't as abandoned as he thought it would be, nor was it empty. The ship was too well maintained to be a forgotten relic. The walls bore faint scorch marks, the kind left by blaster fire. There were signs of battle, of conflict. This wasn't just an old warship, it was a ship that had been actively used, and probably hunted. Gabriel could feel a strange shiver run down his spine. This wasn't just some surplus vessel that had been left to rot. And then, before he could take it all in, he heard the sound, a soft hum, the quiet whir of something in motion. He turned, only to freeze as a figure stepped into view, her silhouette illuminated by the dim emergency lights. A woman. Tall, with skin that was unmistakably blue, shimmering slightly in the low light. Gabriel blinked, unsure if his mind was playing tricks on him. Was she a human? An alien? He couldn't say. Her presence was unnerving, commanding. She didn't look like someone who belonged in a dusty, abandoned ship, she looked like she had always been there, as though she owned the ship as much as it owned her. Before Gabriel could speak, she stepped forward, and in a blur of motion, a blade, no, a plasma knife, was pressed against his throat. He froze, his breath catching in his chest. The edge of the knife pulsed with unstable energy, glowing faintly. He knew that one wrong move, one careless gesture, and it would slice through him like paper. The woman's eyes, silver, piercing, glowing, locked onto his. "Who the hell are you?" she demanded, her voice calm, but filled with the tension of someone ready to strike. Gabriel swallowed, raising his hand slowly in a gesture of surrender. "I'm the owner," he stammered, his voice coming out as more of a question than a statement. She didn't lower the knife. Her eyes narrowed. "No, you're not," she said flatly. "You're not the owner." Gabriel hesitated, his mind racing. "I have the auction receipt," he said, fumbling for his wristband and activating the holo display. The glowing text confirmed the purchase. "Gabriel Reyes, owner," the display read. Her gaze flicked to the display, then back to him. The blade didn't waver. For a long moment, the air was thick with tension. Gabriel's heart pounded in his chest, his mind racing with what to do next. Then, with a sharp exhale, the woman pulled back the knife, tossing it onto a nearby console with an exasperated sigh. "You've got to be kidding me," she muttered, running a hand through her midnight black hair. "They actually sold it to you." Gabriel exhaled, the relief washing over him, but only for a moment. The tension was still palpable. He was still standing in a spaceship that wasn't as empty as he had imagined, with a strange woman who could probably kill him with a flick of her wrist. "Okay, so who are you, then?" he asked, his voice still shaking slightly, but growing bolder. She folded her arms, her silver eyes still fixed on him, her expression unreadable. "Zyra," she replied simply. "And you're standing in my ship?" Gabriel blinked. "Your ship?" He had a hard time wrapping his mind around that. The ship had been listed as abandoned, and yet here she was, alive, well, and definitely not welcoming. Zyra's gaze softened, just a little, but the sharpness didn't leave her voice. Legally speaking, it's now your ship, she said, her tone flat. But this ship was never supposed to be auctioned. It was never supposed to be sold. Gabriel frowned. The plot was thickening, and he wasn't sure he liked where it was going. What do you mean? Zyra looked around the interior of the ship, her silver eyes scanning the faint scorch marks, the crude repairs, the signs of past battles. This ship, it has a history, she said quietly. A dangerous one. And now, you're in the middle of it. Gabriel's pulse quickened. This wasn't just a ship. This wasn't just a random impulse buy. Somehow, he had found himself at the center of something much larger, something far more dangerous than he could have ever anticipated. And Zyra, this alien woman, standing before him, was at the heart of it all. His journey had just begun, and already, everything he thought he knew about life, fate, and impulse had been turned upside down. As the days went by, Gabriel's understanding of the situation grew more complex, and so did his relationship with Zyra. At first, she had been nothing more than a dangerous, enigmatic stranger, someone he had stumbled upon while buying a spaceship on a whim. But now, as they navigated the depths of the galaxy, their bond was becoming undeniable. She was his guide in a universe far darker and more perilous than he could have ever imagined. However, with every passing moment, the truth about Zyra's past loomed larger, threatening to pull them both into an abyss neither of them could escape. It started slowly, like a crack in the ice, barely noticeable at first. Gabriel noticed it one evening as they sat in the cockpit, the ship's soft hum filling the space around them. Zyra had been quieter than usual, her sharp focus on the navigation console absent. She was still the same deadly woman who had pulled a blade on him just days ago, but there was a depth to her that wasn't immediately obvious. Beneath the confidence, beneath the calm exterior, there was something raw and broken, something hidden behind those glowing silver eyes. Gabriel had spent the last few days trying to piece together the ship's history, what it was, who it belonged to, and why it was so valuable. The more he learned, the more he realized that the ship was far more than just a war machine, it was a symbol of something dark, something deeply entwined with Zyra herself. Yet, she had never told him anything about her past. Her words were always careful, measured. She spoke of survival, of keeping the ship out of the wrong hands, but she never once shared why she was on the run, or who was after her. One night, unable to contain his curiosity, Gabriel finally asked the question that had been eating at him. "Zyra," he said quietly, his voice cutting through the thick silence, "I need to know. What's your past? What happened to you?" She didn't answer immediately. Her eyes flicked over to the console, her fingers drumming absent-mindedly on the armrest. Gabriel could see the tension building in her, like she was trying to decide whether to keep her distance or reveal the truth. Finally, with a heavy sigh, Zyra leaned back in her chair, her gaze falling to the floor as if searching for something to anchor her thoughts. Her voice, when it came, was soft, but filled with an unsettling weight. "Do you remember the Black Star Legion?" she asked. Gabriel's mind raced. The name sounded familiar, but he couldn't place it. "The Black Star Legion," he echoed, trying to make sense of it. "Mercenaries? A military group?" Zyra nodded slowly, her eyes lifting to meet his, her expression unreadable. "We were a unit of elite mercenaries, some of the best in the galaxy. We took the jobs no one else would. We were unstoppable, at least, we thought we were. Her voice faltered for a brief moment, but she quickly regained her composure. I was one of them. Gabriel's pulse quickened. He had a sinking feeling that the story she was about to tell him would only make things worse. What happened? He asked cautiously. Zyra's eyes darkened, a shadow passing over her face. We were hired for a job. A big one. A job to steal data from the Imperium. Her voice dropped lower, as if the very name of the Empire filled her with dread. The Imperium, they were always a target for us, always a challenge. But this was different. We were promised riches, power, everything we could ever want. But it wasn't about money. Not really. The data we took, it was about control. She paused, her hands tightening around the armrests as if gripping onto something solid. Gabriel stayed silent, his mind trying to absorb what she was saying. He had known that the ship had a connection to something much bigger, but now it was starting to feel like they were only scratching the surface. The data was about a project, Zyra continued, her eyes growing distant as though reliving the events in her mind. A project so secret that the Imperium would do anything to keep it hidden. It wasn't just about weapons, or military tactics. It was something far more dangerous. Human experimentation. They were experimenting with soldiers, with civilians, twisting people into weapons, testing the limits of human endurance. I didn't know the full extent of it until it was too late. But I led them to it. Gabriel's stomach dropped. He could hardly believe what he was hearing. Human experimentation? The Imperium, the most powerful empire in the galaxy, conducting such horrific acts? His mind reeled, and for a moment, he could barely focus on Zyra's words. But there was more to her story, and the truth was becoming clearer with every passing moment. I didn't know, she whispered, almost to herself. I didn't know until it was too late. We stole the data, but we didn't just steal information, we stole lives. The Imperium didn't want to keep the data out of our hands. They wanted to bury it. They wanted to erase us. And they did. Gabriel leaned forward, his heart pounding. He could see the guilt in her eyes, but there was something else there too, something far darker. What happened to the Legion? He asked. Zyra's jaw tightened. They hunted us down. One by one. Every single member of the Black Star Legion was wiped out, either killed or forced to disappear. I was the only one who made it out alive. The words hit Gabriel like a punch to the gut. Zyra had survived, but at what cost? She was alone, haunted, with a past that had branded her forever. She had been part of something so much bigger than herself, something that had cost the lives of everyone she had once known. And now, that very past was catching up with her. I never wanted any of this, Zyra continued, her voice growing heavy with emotion. I was just trying to survive. But now, the data we took, it's still out there. The people who want it? They don't care who gets caught in the middle. They'll kill anyone to get it back. Gabriel sat there, stunned, as the weight of her words sank in. He had been dragged into something he didn't fully understand. The ship, the bounty hunters, the dangerous past, it was all connected. And Zyra? She wasn't just a stowaway or an ally. She was the key to a galactic conspiracy that could bring down the most powerful empire in existence. She had been running for years, hiding from the people who wanted her dead. She had never asked for this life, and yet, here she was, holding the ship's most valuable secret, a secret that both bound her to the past and made her a target for the future. Gabriel looked at Zyra, his feelings torn between anger, pity, and something else, something that was growing stronger with each passing day. He didn't know what to make of all of it. But one thing was certain, his life would never be the same again. "I'm not running anymore," Zyra said, her voice steady, but with a resolve Gabriel hadn't seen before. "I've spent my entire life running from my past. But now I'm ready to fight for the future." Gabriel knew, in that moment, that there was no turning back. The galaxy they were entering wasn't one of simple choices. It was a galaxy of high stakes, of deadly consequences, and of a past that would shape their every move. And in that galaxy, he had made a choice. A choice to stand beside Zyra, to face whatever came next, together. Their journey had just begun. And whatever the future held, it was going to be anything but ordinary. The deeper Gabriel and Zyra ventured into the mysteries of the ship and its hidden secrets, the darker the truths they uncovered about the galaxy's most powerful empire, the Imperium. Gabriel had initially thought he was caught up in a simple, albeit dangerous, adventure. He had no idea that this reckless auction bid would lead him into a web of corruption, experimentation, and power struggles that stretched far beyond his comprehension. But now, with the revelation of Zyra's past, it was clear that this journey was about more than just surviving. It was about exposing a truth that could unravel the very fabric of the galaxy. The data that Gabriel and Zyra had uncovered was far more valuable, and dangerous, than either of them had anticipated. At first, it had seemed like nothing more than a forgotten relic, a piece of classified information that was just another tool for the rich and powerful. But as Zyra continued to decrypt the files, something changed. What they thought was just a piece of intelligence about military tactics and hidden technology soon revealed itself to be something far more horrifying. The Imperium had been conducting covert, illegal human experiments for decades. The files detailed twisted, grotesque experiments carried out on civilians, soldiers, and even prisoners of war. Entire populations were tested on, tortured, and turned into weapons, all in the name of creating the perfect soldier. Gabriel had trouble processing the enormity of it all. The Imperium, an empire he had always viewed as a symbol of order and control, had become something far darker. They had crossed a line so monstrous that it made every war they fought, every political battle they won, seem meaningless. The cost of their power was not just bloodshed, but the destruction of countless lives. But it wasn't just the data itself that shook Gabriel to his core, it was the realization that Zyra had been unknowingly a part of this nightmare. She had led the Black Star Legion to the very heart of these experiments, and in doing so, she had unwittingly become a part of the Imperium's horrors. But what haunted Gabriel even more was the knowledge that the data they had now uncovered was only a fraction of the full truth. As Zyra continued to decode the encrypted files, it became clear that the Imperium had been working on something much larger. This wasn't just about creating super soldiers. This was about building an army of unquestionable loyalty, one that could overthrow any government, control any planet, and crush any rebellion. And at the heart of it all was the ultimate goal, total control over the galaxy. Zyra's voice broke through Gabriel's thoughts as she studied the final decrypted files. "This isn't just about military power," she said, her voice grim, barely above a whisper. "It's about rewriting the very fabric of what it means to be human." The Imperium wanted to build an army of soldiers who could be programmed, controlled. Soldiers who would never question orders. Who would never disobey. The ultimate weapon. Gabriel's heart sank. His mind raced as the weight of her words settled in. "You're saying they were trying to create an army of mindless soldiers?" he asked, his voice thick with disbelief. Zyra nodded slowly, her eyes never leaving the screen as she scrolled through the files. "Not just mindless. Perfectly obedient. They wanted soldiers who would fight without question, who would die for the Imperium without ever knowing why. They wanted to take away free will. They wanted to control everything. And they were getting closer to achieving it." Gabriel swallowed hard, the pieces falling into place. He had thought that by uncovering these secrets, they would be able to stop the Imperium, to expose the truth and destroy their grip on the galaxy. But it was clear now that the true extent of the Imperium's power went beyond anything he had imagined. The data they had was damning, but was it enough? Could they really bring down an empire with just a few files? Zyra's hands trembled as she flicked through the final file. A chilling silence filled the cockpit as the gravity of their situation hit both of them. The mission had stopped being about escaping bounty hunters and surviving a random auction. It was now about stopping a galaxy-wide nightmare before it spread any further. "We have to expose this," Zyra said, her voice determined, but dark. "We have to make sure that everyone knows what the Imperium has been doing. We have to make them pay." Gabriel nodded slowly, the resolve in his chest hardening. The ship, the bounty hunters, the strange connection with Zyra, they were all part of something much bigger than he had ever expected. They weren't just fighting for their own survival anymore. They were fighting for the future of the galaxy. But he knew that in taking on the Imperium, they weren't just going to be up against corrupt politicians or ruthless mercenaries. They were going to be up against the entire might of a system built to control and destroy. And Zyra, despite everything, was still a target, perhaps the biggest target of them all. The truth was out, but the question was, who would pay the price for it? Zyra's eyes shifted to Gabriel, and for the first time, he saw a glimmer of something deeper, something fragile, something that hadn't been there before. The weight of her past was catching up to her, but now, with Gabriel by her side, she had a choice. She could continue running, continue hiding, or she could fight, not just for herself, but for the people who had suffered because of the Imperium's madness. Gabriel didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing: he wasn't going to let Zyra face this alone. He had seen the ghosts of her past in her eyes, but he had also seen her strength. And in the face of this unimaginable evil, he was going to stand by her, no matter the cost. "I'm with you," he said, his voice steady, but carrying the weight of a promise. "We're going to bring this empire down." Zyra gave him a rare, almost imperceptible smile. But there was something different about it this time, something that wasn't just the cold, calculating smile of a soldier. There was a flicker of hope in it. A belief that maybe, just maybe, they could fight back. As they prepared to take the next step in their battle against the Imperium, the enormity of the task ahead of them became undeniable. But they weren't just fighting against a powerful empire, they were fighting for the lives of millions who had been forgotten, erased, and left behind. The battle was far from over. And now, with the truth in their hands, Gabriel and Zyra would do whatever it took to make sure the galaxy knew the price of power, and the cost of silence. But they both knew that in a universe as vast and unforgiving as theirs, one thing was certain: the truth would come at a price. And they would have to be willing to pay it, no matter what it took. The weight of the secrets they had uncovered was heavy enough to break anyone. Gabriel and Zyra had spent the past days delving into the dark heart of the Imperium, unearthing the truth about its insidious experiments. They had crossed a line that few dared to cross, and now they knew more than they could have ever hoped to, truths that could topple the most powerful empire in the galaxy. Yet, even with the stakes as high as they were, nothing could have prepared Gabriel for the moment that shattered everything he thought he knew about Zyra. It came unexpectedly, like a storm on a calm day, the kind of danger you couldn't see coming until it was too late. Gabriel was in the cockpit, pacing, trying to steady his thoughts. They had a plan now. The data they held was crucial. They could expose the Imperium's dark secrets to the galaxy, ignite the spark that could bring down an empire. But there was something gnawing at him, something he hadn't fully reckoned with. Zyra had been silent for hours, lost in her thoughts, her gaze fixed on the flickering data screen in front of her. Gabriel glanced at her, trying to read her expression. She was always in control, always the soldier who never let anything show. But today, there was something different about her. A subtle shift in her demeanor, a flicker of hesitation in her usually sharp eyes. It was as if the weight of the past was beginning to sink in. Just as he was about to speak, the communication panel blinked to life. The usual crackling static filled the cockpit, and Gabriel's stomach tightened. He wasn't expecting any transmission, it was too risky to be broadcasting their location this close to Imperium-controlled space. But this was different. The message came through encrypted, and the moment he saw the name flash across the screen, his blood ran cold. It was Kess, the leader of the Black Star Legion. Gabriel had thought he was dead, everyone had. The Legion had been wiped out, the survivors scattered or killed. Kess had been the one who ordered their final missions, the one responsible for the betrayal of his own people. Zyra had made it clear that Kess was the one who manipulated her, the one who had dragged her into the heart of the Imperium's experiments. And now, after all this time, Kess was back. But what did it mean? How had he survived? Before Gabriel could process the shock, the image on the screen flickered, and Kess's face emerged, a mask of cold, calculated menace. His eyes were the same, piercing and unyielding, as if the years had only made him sharper, more dangerous. Zyra, Kess's voice crackled through the speaker. I see you've decided to stop running. Gabriel's heart pounded in his chest. Zyra's expression hardened instantly, her body going rigid beside him. He could feel the tension in the air, thick and suffocating. She didn't answer immediately, but Gabriel could see the recognition, the fear in her eyes. She knew this man, this monster, and it was clear that whatever their past had been, it was a dark one. Don't make the mistake of thinking you can hide from the past forever, Kess continued, his voice dripping with authority. You've dug yourself into a hole, Zyra. And now, the rest of us are here to make sure you stay in it. Zyra's hand tightened around the armrest of her chair, her knuckles turning white. Gabriel could see the shift in her. This was personal. It wasn't just about the data anymore. It was about something much deeper. She looked at Gabriel then, a silent plea in her eyes. He had seen her face that way before, when she was weighed down by the burdens of her choices, when she was trying to reconcile the person she had been with the one she was becoming. But this was different. What do you want, Kess? Zyra asked, her voice steady but laced with venom. Why are you contacting me now? Kess's lips curled into a smirk, and Gabriel could see the twisted satisfaction in his expression. I'm not just contacting you, Zyra. I'm giving you a choice. You've been playing with fire for too long, and now the entire galaxy knows what you've done. You were useful, once. You helped us get what we needed, but you were always a liability. And now, that liability is about to come back to bite you. He leaned forward, his voice low and dangerous. But it's not just about you anymore, You've dragged others into this mess. People who thought they could trust you. You've put them all at risk. Gabriel's mind reeled. This was the first time he was hearing any of this. The Black Star Legion, Zyra's role in their mission, the destruction that followed, it was all coming to light in a way he hadn't anticipated. But Kess's words didn't just make him feel betrayed. They made him feel like a pawn in a game he didn't understand. "Don't you dare try to manipulate me again," Zyra snapped, her voice sharp. "I'm done running from you. I'm done being your puppet." Kess's face darkened, and Gabriel could see the anger boiling beneath the surface. "You think you're in control now, Zyra? You think you can walk away from everything you've done? The Imperium will have your head. And I will make sure you get what you deserve." Gabriel felt the weight of Kess's words settle in his chest. This wasn't just about the ship, the data, or even the Imperium. This was about Zyra's past coming back to haunt her. Everything she had done, every choice she had made, was leading up to this moment. And now, Gabriel realized, he was part of it too. He had been drawn into a war he couldn't fully comprehend, and it wasn't just the data or the bounty hunters that made him a target. It was the fact that he was standing by Zyra's side. Kess's image flickered again, and his voice returned, colder than before. "You have two choices, Zyra. You can run, and I'll let you disappear into the void. Or you can hand over the data, and we can both forget this ever happened. It's your call. But make no mistake, you're already marked. There's no escaping your past." Zyra's face went pale, and for the first time, Gabriel saw a crack in her ironclad resolve. The past she had fought so hard to bury was right in front of her. Kess had returned, and with him, all the weight of her mistakes, the choices she had made in the darkness, and the lives that had been destroyed because of them. But Zyra wasn't a woman who would back down. Not anymore. She looked at Gabriel, her eyes filled with a determination he hadn't seen before. She turned back to the screen, her voice steady and unwavering. "I've made my choice," she said. "I'll fight. And this time, I won't run." Kess's expression twisted into something between a sneer and a grin. "Very well. I'll see you soon, Zyra. But don't think you can hide from me forever." The transmission cut off, leaving Gabriel and Zyra alone in the dimly lit cockpit. The silence between them was deafening. Gabriel's heart raced as he turned to her, his mind struggling to process everything that had just unfolded. He had known that Zyra had a past, a dangerous one, but he had never expected it to come for them so soon. Zyra met his gaze, her expression a mixture of defiance and something more vulnerable, something she had kept hidden from him all this time. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I never wanted this for you. I never wanted you to be a part of my mess." Gabriel reached out, placing a hand on hers. "You didn't make me part of it, Zyra," he said, his voice steady. "I chose this. I chose to stand by you." In that moment, they both understood the truth. The battle ahead would not just be for survival. It would be for redemption, for justice, and for the chance to finally put their pasts to rest. And though the odds were stacked against them, they would face whatever came next together, because they had no other choice. The moment after Kess's transmission ended, Gabriel and Zyra sat in silence, the weight of his words hanging heavy in the air. The choice Kess had presented them with, run or hand over the data, wasn't just a tactical decision. It was a reflection of the path they had already walked, a path fraught with impossible choices and unthinkable consequences. For Zyra, it was more than just an ultimatum, it was a stark reminder of the past she had tried so hard to bury, a past that would never let her go. For Gabriel, it was a wake-up call, a realization that he was no longer merely an observer in this war. He was an active participant, and the consequences of his actions would echo through the galaxy. Zyra was the first to break the silence. She had turned away from him, staring out the cockpit window, her eyes tracing the endless void of space, as if seeking something beyond it. Gabriel could feel the tension in her, the weight of the choices she had made before him. She had been running for years, hiding from the ghosts of her past, and now, for the first time in a long time, the ghosts were closing in. Do you ever wonder if running away would have been the better choice? Zyra asked, her voice low, almost a whisper, as if she were speaking to herself rather than to Gabriel. Her fingers hovered over the controls, her knuckles white from the tension. I've spent so much of my life looking over my shoulder, always afraid of what might catch up to me. Maybe I should have stayed hidden. Maybe I should have let the past take me. Gabriel's chest tightened at the words. He had seen Zyra strong, resolute, unyielding in the face of danger. But in that moment, he saw the cracks in her armor. Her vulnerability wasn't just a weakness, it was a part of her story. The part she had fought so hard to keep buried. He could see how badly the weight of her past was pressing down on her, threatening to crush her. He stepped closer, placing a hand on the edge of the console, his voice steady, but laced with empathy. You can't outrun your past forever, Zyra, he said softly. But running away isn't the only way to face it. You've been running for so long. Maybe it's time you stood and fought, not just for yourself, but for the people who are suffering because of it. Zyra looked up at him, her eyes sharp, but there was something softer there now. The hardness in her face seemed to melt away, replaced by something that was raw, human, and undeniably vulnerable. I don't know if I'm strong enough to face it, she confessed, her voice cracking. I don't know if I'm strong enough to fight. The last time I tried, I lost everything. Gabriel could see the pain in her eyes, the depth of the regret that haunted her every waking moment. He knew she was right. She had lost so much. The Black Star Legion, her friends, her comrades, every part of her life had been torn apart by the choices she had made, by the decisions she had been forced to take in the dark corners of the galaxy. You don't have to do this alone, Gabriel said, his voice firm, his hand still resting on the console. I'm with you, Zyra. Whatever comes next, we face it together. You've been fighting for so long, maybe it's time you fought for something that matters. For a moment, she didn't respond. Her gaze drifted back to the endless expanse of space outside, as if seeking some answer there. The silence stretched between them, thick with the weight of the choice they were both facing. The implications of their next move were enormous. If they ran, they would escape the Imperium's wrath, but at what cost? They would be running forever, hiding in the shadows, never knowing peace. The data they held would be lost, and the truth of the Imperium's monstrous actions would remain buried, unseen by the galaxy that needed it most. But if they chose to fight, if they chose to stand against Kess, against the Imperium, they would be stepping into a battle that could cost them everything. The galaxy was vast, its power entrenched in systems that had been in place for centuries. The odds were slim. The Imperium was not just a military force, it was a machine designed to crush resistance, to silence those who dared to stand against it. The two of them, a former mercenary and a reckless man who had just stumbled into this war, would be facing an empire that had crushed millions. Zyra finally broke the silence, her voice steady but filled with a strength Gabriel had never heard before. "We can't run anymore," she said, her eyes now meeting his with a fiery determination. "I've been running my whole life, and look where it's gotten me. I've spent so much time trying to escape, but all I've done is make things worse. It's time to stop running, Gabriel. It's time to stop hiding." Gabriel nodded slowly, the realization sinking in. This wasn't just about the data, or the Imperium, or the bounty hunters who were chasing them. This was about Zyra's redemption. About her facing the demons that had haunted her for so long. It was about him too, because whether he wanted to admit it or not, his life was now irrevocably tied to hers. He had already crossed a point of no return when he stepped onto that ship and chose to stay. There was no running from this now. There was no going back. "What do we do?" he asked, his voice soft, but filled with a sense of inevitability. Zyra took a deep breath, her fingers moving over the controls with a quiet confidence. "We fight," she said simply. "We fight because the galaxy needs to know the truth. We fight because there are people out there who are counting on us. And most importantly, we fight because we've already come too far to stop now." In that moment, Gabriel understood. It wasn't about surviving anymore. It wasn't about escaping to safety or finding a way out. They had crossed a threshold, and there was no turning back. This was the moment when they decided what kind of people they wanted to be. Would they continue to run from their pasts, or would they face it head-on, with everything they had? The choice had been made, not in some dramatic, world-changing moment, but in the quiet exchange of resolve between two people who understood the stakes. Gabriel knew that they weren't just fighting for themselves, they were fighting for something bigger. They were fighting for those who couldn't fight for themselves, for the innocent lives that had been sacrificed in the name of power. And so, they prepared for what was to come. The ship's engines hummed to life beneath them as they charted their course toward the unknown. Gabriel and Zyra stood side by side, ready to face the enemy that had once seemed so invincible. They were no longer two strangers bound by circumstance. They were allies, partners, and now, they were warriors united by a single cause. They had made their choice. They would not flee. They would fight. The galaxy had never been kind to Zyra. It had never offered her a place to call home, never given her a chance to rest without fear. She had spent years running, hiding in the shadows, trying to outrun the ghosts of her past. For so long, she had convinced herself that survival was all that mattered, that the price of her soul was worth the freedom she craved. But somewhere along the way, that price became too steep. She had lost more than she could bear: friends, comrades, and most painfully, her own sense of self. The truth of her past had been a chain around her neck, dragging her deeper into the darkness with every step. Yet, as she stood beside Gabriel, preparing to face the greatest threat they had ever known, something began to change within her. It wasn't just the weight of the Imperium's pursuit that had shifted the balance. It was the quiet strength she found in him, the way his presence steadied her, made her believe that perhaps, just perhaps, she could finally fight for something greater than survival. In him, she saw something she had never allowed herself to hope for: redemption. Gabriel, on the other hand, had never expected any of this. He had come into this adventure with nothing but a reckless impulse, buying a ship on a whim, not knowing it would lead him to a battle for the very soul of the galaxy. He had wanted excitement, a break from the monotony of his life, but what he had found was something far deeper, a love that had grown out of a partnership forged in fire, a bond built on trust and survival. From the moment he met Zyra, she had been a mystery, a dangerous and formidable force that he couldn't ignore. Her strength was undeniable, her resolve unwavering, but beneath that exterior, he had sensed a vulnerability, a fragility that called to him in ways he couldn't explain. Over time, that connection had blossomed into something far more complicated than either of them could have imagined. They weren't just two people fighting side by side anymore. They had become something more, something inseparable. The journey they had taken together was not just about defeating enemies or outsmarting the forces that pursued them. It had become a journey of self-discovery, of learning to trust each other in ways that went beyond mere survival. They had seen each other at their best and their worst, had faced the darkest parts of themselves and each other. But through it all, they had remained together. Now, standing on the edge of the unknown, with the weight of the galaxy on their shoulders, Gabriel realized that this was it. There was no going back. They had crossed the point of no return when they chose to fight. It wasn't just about the data, the Imperium, or the war they were about to wage. It was about them. About the bond that had grown between them, the love that had quietly taken root in the midst of chaos. As the ship hummed beneath them, the stars streaking by in a blur of light, Gabriel took a moment to look at Zyra. Her face was set, determined, but there was something else there, a quiet strength that radiated from her, a confidence that he had never seen before. It was as if, for the first time in years, she had stopped running, stopped hiding. She was ready to face the future, ready to confront the demons of her past. And for the first time, Gabriel knew that he was ready to face it with her. "Whatever happens," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion, "I'm with you. We're in this together." Zyra turned to him, her eyes meeting his with a depth of feeling that spoke louder than words. There were no more barriers between them, no more secrets. The walls they had both built had crumbled, replaced by something far stronger. It wasn't just about the fight ahead. It was about the trust they had placed in each other, the love they had forged in the fires of adversity. "I know," she replied softly, her voice carrying the weight of everything they had been through. "And I'm not running anymore. Not from this. Not from you." In that moment, Gabriel understood. The battle they were about to face wasn't just a fight for survival, it was a fight for the future they both wanted. They had spent so long fighting for their own lives, but now, they were fighting for something bigger. They were fighting for each other. And that, in the end, was what would give them the strength to win. The journey they had shared had transformed them, not just as individuals, but as partners, as a team. Zyra had once believed that love was a weakness, a luxury she couldn't afford in the brutal world she inhabited. But now, she saw it for what it was, a force stronger than any weapon, more enduring than any army. Love had become their greatest strength. It had given them the courage to face their pasts, to confront their fears, and to push forward when all seemed lost. Gabriel, too, had come to understand the true meaning of love. It wasn't about the thrill of the adventure or the rush of the fight. It was about standing by someone, even when the world was falling apart around them. It was about being there for each other, no matter the cost. Love, in its purest form, was about sacrifice. It was about putting someone else's needs before your own, about giving everything you had, even when there was nothing left to give. And so, with the ship's engines roaring beneath them, Gabriel and Zyra prepared for the battle ahead. They were no longer just two people caught in the tides of fate. They were warriors, bound by love, ready to fight not just for their own survival, but for a future that had once seemed impossible. The galaxy was vast, and its darkness was formidable. But together, they knew they could face it. Zyra glanced over at Gabriel, her gaze soft but resolute. "We're going to make it, aren't we?" she asked, her voice filled with an emotion that was both hopeful and uncertain. Gabriel smiled, his heart full of certainty for the first time in a long while. "We are," he said, his voice unwavering. "Because we have each other." The ship surged forward, its engines propelling them into the vast unknown. Ahead of them lay a future they couldn't yet see, filled with dangers and challenges they hadn't yet faced. But one thing was clear: no matter what the galaxy threw at them, they would face it together. And that made all the difference. In the end, it wasn't the battles they fought or the enemies they defeated that would define them. It was the love they had found in each other, the redemption they had earned together, and the unwavering bond that had seen them through the darkest of times. They had survived, not because they were strong individually, but because they were strong together. And together, there was nothing they couldn't overcome. Their love had endured, and in the end, it was the one thing the galaxy could never take from them. The journey that Gabriel and Zyra had embarked on was far from ordinary. It had begun with a reckless auction bid, a decision made on impulse, that had spiraled into something much larger than either of them could have imagined. What started as an unexpected adventure had transformed into a fight for survival, a confrontation with the most powerful empire in the galaxy, and ultimately, a battle for redemption. Along the way, they had faced unimaginable dangers, uncovered the darkest of secrets, and discovered a bond between them that neither had anticipated. And yet, as they stood together, looking out at the endless expanse of stars, they realized that their journey was not over. It had only just begun. The battle they had fought had been monumental. They had stood against an empire that had crushed millions, an empire that had manipulated, controlled, and twisted the very fabric of life for its own gain. The data they had uncovered, the secrets they had exposed, had sent shockwaves throughout the galaxy. But even in the wake of their victory, there was still so much to be done. The Imperium was not defeated, it was wounded, but it would rise again if they allowed it. For Gabriel and Zyra, this truth was as daunting as it was liberating. The path they had chosen was no longer just about surviving the next attack, evading the next bounty hunter, or finding refuge in the quiet corners of the galaxy. It was about something bigger. It was about shaping a future where the horrors they had witnessed were no longer allowed to exist. And this time, they weren't alone. They had each other. And for the first time in their lives, they were no longer running from the past. They were standing firm, ready to fight for what they believed in. The truth was, neither of them had been prepared for what lay ahead. Gabriel had entered this journey with no real understanding of the gravity of the decisions he was making. His desire for something different, something exciting, had led him to Zyra. But in finding her, he had found something far more profound, a cause worth fighting for. He had come to understand that the world he had lived in, the life he had known, was nothing compared to the world they were now part of. And in choosing to stand by Zyra's side, he had discovered a strength in himself that he never knew existed. Zyra, too, had undergone a transformation. The woman who had once believed that survival was all that mattered, that the past could never be escaped, had slowly allowed herself to hope. She had spent years running, burying her past deeper with every step, trying to outrun the ghosts that haunted her. But now, standing beside Gabriel, she had begun to believe that maybe, just maybe, there was something worth fighting for. She had rediscovered trust, something she thought she had lost forever. In him, she saw a partner, someone who didn't just stand beside her in battle, but someone who stood beside her in life, ready to face whatever the future held. As the ship glided through the vastness of space, heading toward the uncertain future they had chosen, Gabriel could feel the weight of their journey settling over him. They had taken down the Imperium's facade, exposed its darkest secrets to the universe. But the truth was, this victory wasn't just theirs. It belonged to the millions of people who had suffered under the regime's cruelty, to the lives that had been lost in silence, to the forgotten souls who had never been given a chance to fight back. They had sparked a fire. A fire that would not easily be extinguished. But even as they looked ahead, Gabriel and Zyra knew that their battle was far from over. The galaxy was vast, and its darkness was deep. The enemies they had made were powerful, and the forces that had shaped the Imperium would not fade quietly into the night. But they had something now that they had never had before: hope. Hope that together, they could make a difference. Hope that, despite the overwhelming odds, they could rebuild what had been broken. And that hope, in its simplest form, was their new beginning. They didn't know what the future held. They didn't know where they would go next or what they would face. But they knew one thing for certain: they would face it together. And in a galaxy that had been ruled by fear and control for so long, that was more powerful than any weapon. Zyra turned to Gabriel, her eyes filled with a quiet certainty. "We've come this far," she said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "But this isn't the end. It's just the beginning." Gabriel nodded, a smile playing at the corners of his lips. "I know. Whatever happens, we'll face it together." The ship hummed beneath them, the steady pulse of the engines a reminder of the journey still to come. The stars outside were just a backdrop to the world they were about to build. No longer prisoners to their pasts, no longer hiding from their enemies, they were free to carve out a future of their own choosing. It wouldn't be easy. The road ahead was uncertain, filled with danger and doubt. But in that moment, with the galaxy spread out before them, Gabriel and Zyra knew they had made the right choice. They had chosen to fight, not for survival, but for something greater. For the chance to rebuild, to heal, and to give the galaxy something it had long been deprived of: hope. And so, they moved forward, together. Not as fugitives, not as pawns in a game much larger than themselves, but as fighters. As partners. As something more than they had ever been before. They had survived the worst of what the galaxy could throw at them, and now, they would be the ones who shaped the future. It was a new beginning, one where the choices they made would define the rest of their lives. A beginning not defined by the past, but by the courage to face whatever came next, together. The story of Gabriel Reyes and Zyra is not just a tale of high-stakes space battles, futuristic technology, and alien conspiracies. Beneath the surface of their intergalactic journey, lies a profound exploration of the human spirit, of the power of choice, and the transformative force of personal redemption. Their narrative is one that resonates with timeless themes: the complexity of our pasts, the relationships we forge along the way, and the decisions that shape our futures. At its heart, this story teaches us that the past does not define us, our actions and choices do. Gabriel, a man who initially stumbles into an adventure he didn't seek, comes to realize that he is not just the product of his mistakes, but the creator of his destiny. Through his interactions with Zyra, a woman burdened by the scars of her past, Gabriel learns that it is not enough to survive. To truly thrive, one must confront one's inner demons, make choices that align with personal integrity, and take responsibility for the consequences of those choices. The decisions they make in the face of overwhelming odds, their willingness to stand up for what is right, and their ability to find hope in even the darkest of circumstances are what ultimately define their futures. One of the most poignant lessons we can take away from this narrative is the importance of embracing vulnerability. Both Gabriel and Zyra carry emotional scars. Gabriel, though initially naive and caught in a web of happenstance, slowly uncovers the depth of his own emotional strength. He learns to embrace his vulnerabilities, no longer seeing them as weaknesses but as integral parts of his identity and growth. Zyra, a powerful alien woman with a past riddled with betrayal and loss, also grapples with her emotional scars. Her journey is about finding the courage to open up, trust again, and embrace love and connection, despite the deep emotional wounds she carries. Their relationship is built on mutual respect and understanding, but it is also a relationship forged in the fires of adversity. Their trust is not handed to each other freely, it is earned through shared experiences, sacrifices, and hard decisions. The trials they face together, both external and internal, teach them the value of partnership and the strength that can be found in vulnerability. This is one of the most powerful messages of the story, that true strength is not about never being vulnerable, but about finding the courage to show up and be present, even when we are broken. It is through these moments of shared vulnerability that they grow stronger together and develop a deeper connection, one that is rooted in love, mutual respect, and the acknowledgement of each other's scars. The story also emphasizes the importance of redemption. Zyra's past, marked by betrayal, guilt, and regret, is a constant source of torment for her. But it is through the choices she makes in the present that she begins to redeem herself. Her journey reflects the universal truth that redemption is not a destination but a process, an ongoing journey where we make the conscious decision to learn from our mistakes, confront the consequences of our actions, and strive to do better. Redemption is about self-forgiveness, but also about finding a path forward that reflects the lessons we have learned. Zyra's transformation from a woman running from her past to one standing resolute in her future mirrors the challenges that many of us face in our own lives, the constant struggle between what we have done and what we are becoming. For Gabriel, his journey is about awakening to the larger forces at play in the universe. Initially, his story is driven by a desire for adventure, for the thrill of new experiences. But as he forms his connection with Zyra, he finds himself facing not just external conflicts but internal ones as well. He learns that true heroism is not about fighting external enemies but about facing the battle within. Gabriel's shift from a passive observer to an active participant in his own fate is a powerful reminder that we are all capable of changing the course of our lives. We are not defined by our circumstances, rather, we are defined by the actions we take in response to them. Gabriel chooses to face his fears and rise above the confusion and chaos around him. In doing so, he embraces his role as a leader and protector, not just for Zyra but for others in need of guidance and hope. The story also explores the theme of personal agency and the power of choice. Both Gabriel and Zyra are faced with difficult decisions at various points in their journey. At each juncture, they must choose, will they run away from their pasts, or will they face them head-on? Will they let fear and doubt control their actions, or will they embrace the unknown and take responsibility for their futures? Their ability to choose the harder path, the one that leads toward growth and transformation, is a key factor in their success. In a world full of distractions and external pressures, the ability to make a conscious, intentional choice is one of the most empowering gifts we have. The choices Gabriel and Zyra make throughout their journey remind us that no matter how difficult the road ahead may seem, we are always the architects of our own destinies. One of the most powerful elements of the story is its ability to inspire us to be more than just survivors. Gabriel and Zyra's relationship evolves from mere survival to an exploration of deeper emotional truths and personal growth. This story serves as a call to action for anyone who has ever felt trapped by their past or uncertain about their future. It teaches us that we don't have to stay stuck in the patterns of our past mistakes, nor do we have to succumb to the weight of fear and doubt. There is always a path forward, a chance for redemption, and the possibility of building a future that is shaped by our choices and our willingness to evolve. In conclusion, Gabriel and Zyra's journey is more than just a science fiction adventure. It is a powerful metaphor for the choices we face in our own lives, the decision to confront our past, embrace vulnerability, and take ownership of our future. The story teaches us that true strength is not about being invulnerable but about learning to live authentically in the face of hardship and adversity. It reminds us that redemption is always within our reach, that love can heal even the deepest scars, and that, ultimately, we are all capable of choosing a better path, one that leads to growth, transformation, and hope. Whether we are fighting literal battles or facing our own internal conflicts, the message is clear: we are all the heroes of our own stories, and the power to change our lives lies within us. As the final moments of their battle against the oppressive forces of the Imperium draw near, Gabriel and Zyra stand on the precipice of something much greater than they could have imagined. Their journey, filled with twists, betrayal, and unexpected alliances, is far from over. They've fought side by side, confronting not just external enemies but their own internal demons as well. Yet, even in the face of the worst threats the galaxy can offer, they know that their most dangerous challenge lies ahead, one that will test not only their strength but their very survival. So, what happens next? In the first part of their journey, we saw Gabriel, an ordinary man with no particular aspirations beyond a simple adventure, thrown into a world of danger and intrigue. A seemingly harmless auction led to a life-altering discovery: a spaceship, a powerful weapon, and, most unexpectedly, Zyra. Their paths crossed by chance, but the bond they formed was anything but accidental. Together, they faced enemies, uncovered galactic conspiracies, and navigated a web of betrayal and secrets. But despite all they've endured, they have yet to uncover the full extent of the power they hold, and the impact their choices will have on the future of the galaxy. In the closing moments of their previous battle, Gabriel and Zyra made a decision that could change the course of everything. They chose to fight not just for their lives, but for the future of the galaxy itself. With the Imperium's secret exposed, with the stolen data in their possession, they've become targets of not just the Empire, but every faction in the galaxy that wants to control that information. Their every move will be watched, every step taken with suspicion. The stakes are now higher than ever before. But the real question is, what will happen when they truly understand what they've uncovered? The data they've found, secrets buried deep within the Imperium's operations, could topple everything. This isn't just about stolen weapons or classified military intel. What Gabriel and Zyra have discovered is far more sinister than anyone could have imagined. It's a dark truth that could reshape everything they know about the galaxy, its leaders, and the true power behind the throne. And as they stand on the edge of revealing this information to the rest of the universe, the consequences of their actions will have ripple effects far beyond anything they could predict. What happens when they release this truth? What if the galaxy isn't ready for it? What if the very people they're fighting for turn against them? Will their mission end in chaos, or will it spark a revolution that will change everything? With so many factions vying for power, and with enemies in every corner, how will Gabriel and Zyra survive the storm that is about to come? And let's not forget the looming figure of Kess. The leader of the Black Star Legion, thought to be dead, has returned. He's not just an enemy to Zyra, he's a reminder of the past she's tried to bury. The more they uncover about the Legion and their mission, the more Gabriel realizes how deeply entangled he has become in a conflict that stretches back far beyond his involvement. What does Kess want with them now? What does he know about Zyra's past that she hasn't revealed? As Gabriel and Zyra continue their journey, they'll be forced to confront not just external enemies, but the ghosts of their pasts, ones that threaten to unravel everything they've fought for. But the questions don't stop there. What other powerful figures are out there, watching their every move? How many are secretly vying for the secrets Zyra and Gabriel possess? As the story unfolds, they'll be forced to make even harder decisions, to trust those they thought were allies, or to take matters into their own hands. Will the alliance they've forged be enough to withstand the forces conspiring against them? And perhaps most intriguingly, what is Zyra's true connection to the Imperium? We know she has a history with them, but how deep does her involvement go? Her loyalty has been questioned, and as the truth about her past comes to light, Gabriel will find himself caught in a web of deception and moral dilemmas. Can Zyra be trusted, or will the very woman he has fought for turn out to be the one who holds the key to their undoing? At the heart of it all lies a deeper mystery. What if the data they've discovered is just the tip of the iceberg? Could it be that they've only scratched the surface of something much larger, something that could change the way they see the galaxy? If they are to survive what's coming, they will need more than just strength and resolve. They will need to confront the very fabric of the universe they've known and reshape it. As Gabriel and Zyra face these questions, they'll also have to deal with the unexpected consequences of their relationship. What began as an unlikely partnership has grown into something much deeper, something that transcends their shared fight for survival. But as they continue to fight side by side, will their bond withstand the pressure of the galaxy's chaos? Or will their relationship crumble under the weight of the universe's harsh realities? The stakes for their personal connection have never been higher. What if everything they thought they knew about loyalty, friendship, and love is tested in ways they never expected? What if Gabriel and Zyra's feelings for each other become the very thing that jeopardizes everything they've worked for? The lines between ally and enemy, friend and foe, love and duty will blur, and the cost of their choices will be greater than they could have ever imagined. What will they sacrifice? What will they lose? As the dust settles from their most recent battle, Gabriel and Zyra find themselves at a crossroads. The next step will determine the future of the galaxy and the future of their relationship. The forces arrayed against them are formidable, and the path ahead is fraught with peril. But even in the darkest of times, there is hope. Gabriel and Zyra have proven that together, they can overcome unimaginable odds. They have found strength in each other, and in the truth they've uncovered. But the battle is far from over. With enemies closing in, new alliances forming, and the truth of the Imperium's dark secrets on the brink of being revealed, Gabriel and Zyra will have to push themselves to their limits and beyond. Will they succeed? Or will their journey end in disaster? There's only one way to find out. So, don't miss out on the next chapter in Gabriel and Zyra's journey. The stakes are higher, the risks are greater, and the truth is more dangerous than ever. Stay tuned, because what happens next will change everything. Stay tuned for the next part of the story. The mystery deepens, the stakes rise, and the fate of the galaxy hangs in the balance. What will Gabriel and Zyra do next? Will they survive the chaos ahead? Find out in the next chapter. Don't miss it, keep watching, and keep wondering.